Thank you for being part of Voice of Customer Service with us.
My pleasure. So thank you so much for the invite. I'll get started. So today I'm going to talk a bit about the power of voice and speech, okay, and how can we apply that to customer support. So let me see if I can move slides. Okay, good. So starting by speech. Speech is one of the most complex tasks in terms of motor control that we humans do. When we're baby, we learn how to speak. And I had the pleasure of, while I was doing my PhD in this area, while I was learning about the physiology of speech, I also had a small child. My son was born, and it was so interesting to see how speech works, right, in theory, but also seeing it happening in practice, seeing his motor control improve and seeing the complexity behind it. And if we think a bit about it, right, uh, the process, it all starts in our lungs with the air coming through our vocal cords, and then we position our articulators in a way that sounds come up with something like something where we can use to express our thoughts, our intents, but in a super fast way and with a level of detail that is amazing. And so it's such a complex system that today we continue to study and analyze and understand better how speech production works. Um, and so why is this important for customer support? Well, there's a study, there are several studies, right, that indicate that for almost 40% of people do prefer voice channels. And if we go up a bit in our age range, if we go to more senior populations, that number increases even more. And so since voice is such used or preferred medium in order to reach out to our customer support, isn't this something that we should take a closer look? Because it's really important that, and this is also part of the study that I quote here, is that customer support is one of the reasons why people remain loyal to a brand. Probably all of us have heard our friends saying that, oh, I bought this article, but it had this defect, and customer support was amazing, or customer support was not good enough or not fast enough, or didn't understand me. And so customer support creates, I would say, an aura around the brand, and it's something that really resonates to customers, right? And today we have 60% of our users that do prefer to use self-service, but many times they bump into problems like, okay, I went to the website and there's not enough information. The chatbot didn't respond what I wanted. Or there's this perception that the issue that I have is just too complex. And I can give a personal example where the other day I was calling a utilities company, and for me, it was a complex problem to solve with my electricity supply. But for them, well, it's something that the agent had the procedure. They immediately responded. They have the answer at their fingertips. So how can we improve this? How can I still interact via speech, right, which is our preferred way of interaction, and still combine this with our preference for self-service? And there's some people that when we think about customer support, there's some people that immediately think about grabbing a phone and calling our customer support. There's other people which the last thing they'll do is pick up the phone in order to call customer support. So we need to handle all cases, and we need to know who is our target customers. And so if we think of a self-service via speech, what can we leverage? And today's talk is all about that, is about how do we leverage voice and how do we leverage speech communication. And what does that has to do with Define Crowd? Well, Define Crowd is a data provider, and we specialize in speech and NLP. And one of the things that we do is to do speech collections for you to train your speech recognition models. And a similar problem that we have is that we also want to understand what's behind the speech signal. Is the person recording the utterance correctly? What was the utterance that they recorded? What is the environment behind that utterance? So we want to understand what happened in that speech collection so that we have a good data set to train or acoustic models that then are used to do speech recognition. And so what can we learn from voice? Okay, and from voice, there's several parameters that we can extract from voice. Let's start by simple ones. So if when I call my customer support, I can learn about the environment. Where am I calling from? Am I calling from the street? Am I calling from a factory? Am I calling from home, from a quiet environment? Which objects surround me? What's the type of channel I'm using? What's the type of channel I prefer to use? There's also aspects about demography that I can infer from the speech signal. I can understand based on the accents, where is this person from? I can understand probably their studies around the level of education being extracted just from the voice, or also behavior. The way we speak at different audiences changes, right? And if I'm talking to a machine, or if I'm talking to a big audience, or if I'm talking to a customer support, that's also changes. That's also true on the agent side. I'm talking about from the client perspective, but if you think on the agent side, it's also quite important how I position my voice, how do I adjust my behavior in order to adjust to the person that is on the other side. Not only that, but where it gets interesting is that from the voice, I can extract psychological parameters like emotions, personality, sociological parameters like social status, and even professions. What do people do? And we reach a point where it's also, we can also leverage the fact that voice is quite a unique signature that we have. So how can we apply that to our customer support via speech? Before we go into that, there's also other parameters that I can extract. I can extract medical parameters that tell me if there's what's my physical health, if there are diseases. There's several studies in the speech community around that, which is less of an application here. There's also the aspects around physiology, age, hormone levels, heart rate, blood pressure. All of that can be extracted from the voice. And there's the physical parameters. And for this might be something surprising, right? From the voice, I can extract parameters like height, weight, body shape, facial structure. And there's one interesting study that I'd like to share with you, which is this study that was presented at CVPR in 2019 and used some videos extracted from YouTube and the internet in general for some celebrities, sort of the voices of some celebrities. And it's amazing how you get from this input, this speech signal, to a reconstructed face. And so by no means we want to uniquely identify the person using this algorithm, but we can see that there's a high correlation of the traits of our voice and the image that we get in the end. And so this is all something that we can learn from the voice. So in summary, I can go from age, appearance, health status, arousal, emotions, and even social status or educational settings or regional origins, just via voice. So how do I do this, right? How does this happen? And when I look at the speech signal, I can extract a lot of features. And these are just a few examples just to illustrate here what we're talking about. So I can do a temporal analysis and look at the speaking rate of someone. I can extract how loud that person is speaking, which might be interesting to detect emotions. I can look at the pitch, for example, really important feature for gender detection. Or I can look at other things, breathiness, for example. How many times someone needs to breathe in order to during a utterance, and how does that affect what the other parameters that we can extract, and what are these descriptors that we can extract from the voice. And there's a lot of descriptors we can extract, but there's the few ones that I like to point out. Stress, right? Stress in call centers. How unpleasant is someone? Is someone whining? Is someone cheerful? Is there someone on the other side with a cold, or is that person unstable? So the applications that we get to this is, if I can detect emotions, then I can detect whether the agent or the customer gets angry. If my levels of happiness change during the call, what am I doing about it, right? If someone goes from a neutral emotional state to an angry state, what was the trigger of that? And what can I do in terms of my call center? How can I turn that in a way that I don't lose that customer in order, and I can, for example, raise alerts when the level of stress is happening. People have bad days, both agents and customers, right? And so I can and I should act upon on these events. One of the things that also the previous speaker mentioned, which I totally agree, is this can also be used to give feedback to agents to improve, and we can get to real-time feedback. If I'm extracting this from the speech signal, then there's a lot of feedback that can be given to the agent in order for the agent to position their voice, to position their statements, to correct certain things, either when they're learning or when things start to get out of hand. And then I'll also talk a little bit about identification. It's so annoying when you have to call when you call customer support and then you need to identify yourself. Then they transfer you to another department and you need to identify yourself again. And then you hang up and you need to call again. Oh, and it's me, and you need to again do identification. So how can we detect that? And if we look at the speech signal, these are all things that I can extract fairly easily. The question is, what do I do with them, and how does that help me to retain my customer? Because it's not only about getting into this information, but what do I do with this information? And so when we take another step and we put together this expression of intents, and we start looking more deeply into also the speech side, and there's, let's say, two speech styles that we can group. When I'm talking to a human, I'll use a different type of a different way to express myself. So probably I'll say, "Hey, I'm doing well, thank you. I have this issue." I'll probably use some fillers like but when I'm talking to a machine, there's no empathy on the other side. If there's no empathy on the other side, what's the point of me expressing any kind of emotion? So probably when I hear a machine and I detect that is a machine, maybe I'll just say something much drier and with less emotion. And so the type of speech that we have in these interactions changes is quite different from what I have for this interaction. And if we look at this, what do I need to build this, right? I need a speech recognition engine. That would be one of the key parts. But what challenges do I have today? Still, I need to handle accents. Such a basic thing, right? It's interesting that today accents is still one of the problems that we have with speech recognition. We achieve rates of 98% or more in some cases. But then when someone with a strong accent comes in, and I didn't train my model with enough data to reflect the patterns of that pronunciation, then the performance gets really low. And accents can change from city to city, from area, just a few kilometers or miles away, and the accent is already different. So the fact that I need my data used to train my model to cover all the accents also means that I need to understand which type of people or which people from which origins, from which regions are going to call to my customer support. And then there's the emotional speech. If I start to be emotional talking to machine, there goes the speech recognition performance. And last but not least, the domain, right? The domain that I'm trying to tackle, things like health, legal, they have very specific terms in terms of domain. So all the model, the technology that I have behind it needs to tackle this and needs to understand all these points. If not, it's just technology, and probably the adoption rate, my success rate will be quite low. Another part that I mentioned is speaker identification. And there was, not so long ago, there was a system that I use that was asking me to say my ID via speech recognition. And it's still quite an interesting problem, because when people are talking via phone and you try to use speech recognition, imagine that I'm saying my ID, so I can go for 1, 2, 3. Oh, wait, no, not 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4. No, that's not exactly right. Let me check. Let me grab my wallet. Let me confirm. All of this works super well with a human, and the human can understand. But with a machine, it's just annoying. It's just frustrating. So you really want to avoid it. And the fact that you can get a voice print out of the audio file is also quite interesting, right? So how can we replace these 20 digits by my voice print and also be careful with all the privacy concerns around it? Because a voice signature, it is considered PII, and it's something that we all need to be aware of. So there's all these useful lists of resources that go from speech recognition to text-to-speech, named entity recognizers, voice activity detection, speaker turns, all these voice profiling tools and features that I think they can improve a lot customer support via speech. But there's one thing to have in mind, which is all these tools won't be useful, right? It's not only about the technology, but how do you apply it to your problem? So if, for example, you have your dialogue full of open questions, which are much harder to solve than just a yes or no question. If you don't know who is your target customer, if you don't know who is the people that usually call your customer support, and one thing that is really important is it's not only about automating or the call centers by reducing the number of people that work there. I think there's that component that companies often look at, right? When we're talking to a high-level manager, they often says, I want to use technology in order to reduce the costs that I have with my support line. But it's also about how do you maintain your client? How do you guarantee the brand loyalty that we started the conversation with, right? Because if people get frustrated and they can't really use your self-service, if your dialogue is not well structured, if you don't track your success and you don't know the population that calls your customer success line, then you won't retain your customers. And so it's not, just to summarize, and because we're at an end in terms of time, it's not only about the technology that we use, which is, I think, one of the key pieces to do this transformation, but also how do you grab your data that you have today and you transform it into useful information that allows you to reshape your voice-based customer experience. And voice is something that is predicted to grow a lot in the following years. And so customer experience and customer support needs to be aligned with that growth. Thank you.
Joel, great presentation. I'm going to hit reclaim host. And if you don't mind unsharing your screen.
I will do that.
So great job. Big fans of
Thank
Define
you.
Crowd over here. Yeah, and everything y'all are doing. Appreciate you rolling with the punches here in the calling an audible. You're ready for your number to be called, and I appreciate that. Thank you for being part of Voice of Customer Service with us.
Thank you, Bradley. It was a pleasure.